Well, hello again, YouTube. It's Maggie here, and I've just recorded a video which I will have just posted before this one to talk about what the last year has been for me since I last posted on here on this channel. So if you want to know a bit more about the journey that Graham and I've been on in the last year, then please go and watch that because we don't want to talk too much about that now. But in a nutshell, Graham and I met probably about 2 years ago, working in the background in a natural health practitioner's membership site. And I first saw Graham when I went to a conference for this membership and saw Graham talking about his journey and got very emotional because Graham's story is a beautiful one and he tells it beautifully. It's not often that I hear him tell it without getting a bit emotional. Um, and over time, got to know Graham. We've worked together in lots of different ways. And in October last year, we came together with some other like-minded folk and started to work on a project, which was going to be a membership site for people like ourselves who are interested in natural health of all kinds, on all levels, and well-being. And the idea was to build a private membership site where people could come and gather and exchange ideas and learn and grow together around that subject, that greater subject. Um, and it started off well. We were all very enthusiastic about it. But as I mentioned in this other video that I've recorded, funding was removed quite early in the process because of a big change in circumstances from the person who promised our funding. And that had a big knock-on effect, which meant that the greater ambitions of the project weren't reached and that we had to close it a year later, 2 months ago in October this year. However, in that time, we had built a little community that still has some momentum behind it and some events and some calls which are still running and being really well attended. Um, Support groups and just events that support people to develop their intuition, for example, or again, just come together and chat about the subjects that they're interested in with other people who are open. And Graham and I, working in the central team together, had partnered on working on ways to develop the project in terms of outreach and marketing, things that we weren't particularly experienced in ourselves, but were keen to, because we were passionate about the work we were doing, we were keen to communicate it better and find better ways to do that. And so we had quite a few creative ideas that we shared, which we're looking to take forward in some way. And this video is really just to introduce both of us and talk about our journeys to getting to where we are today, and some of those ideas and the ways that we propose to take those forward, essentially, to see if anyone listening would like to be involved and to stay in touch. And loosely speaking, and we'll get into the bones of that probably during the conversation, I think we just both agree that we just want to start a new conversation around what it is to be truly healthy in these times, which we both acknowledge is a bigger picture than what the mainstream picture provides. It's holistic, it's multi-level, and and nobody really has the full answer to any of it. But we have both our little jigsaw puzzle pieces that we want to bring, and we just want to get a conversation going for those who want to have that conversation, so that we can work collectively with people to work it out together and co-create. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Graham, and some of you may know him as his previous handle, the Red Pill Pharmacist. But I will let him tell his story because he's going to do a much better job of it than me. And yeah, over to you, my esteemed colleague. Please share.
Thanks so much, Maggie. Yeah, so I guess I'll just do this sort of potted highlight version of my journey to now. But I think that the significant parts of my journey. I mean, I was adopted at 2 weeks old. I was forcibly removed from my mother. So my mother, I'm reunited with my mum. I've been, together with her for about 20 odd years now. But my mum, I mean, she's basically a shaman. She's a white witch or a shaman. She's incredibly gifted and knowledgeable. And looking back, when I tell my journey, you'll understand why I couldn't stay with my mum. So I was fostered, then adopted into a middle class family. Dad was a bank manager, mum was a physiotherapist. I went through school, didn't like being taught, was a bit rebellious, asked too many questions. But I was very science-based. I did three sciences at A level, and then thought, what the heck do I do now? And I thought, oh, I'll be a pharmacist. You know, pharmacy needs three sciences, so I like biology mainly and chemistry. Trained to be a pharmacist in the 1980s, qualified, thought I don't really want to be a pharmacist clinically, and I went down the management route initially with Boots the Chemist here in the UK. Did that for 20 years, well, 16 years, and then I joined the NHS as a senior manager in 2002. So I was a director of commissioning. So my job was to basically organise the holistic NHS health system, all the way from primary care, you know, GP land, optometry, dentistry, pharmacy, all the way to through ambulances, secondary care, mental health hospitals, tertiary hospitals, the full lot. And I did that for about 15 years until a change of government brought all of that to an end, and I was offered redundancy. I'd had enough by then. I could see the writing on the wall. Left in 2013. I became a freelance consultant and basically went to work for the dark side and in the pharmaceutical industry for 3 years. And you know, I knew how the NHS worked. Pharmaceutical industry doesn't know how the NHS works, bizarrely. So I did a good job of joining the gap in the middle
Mm.
for 3 years, and then had enough of that. Decided to step away from management a bit, rejoin the NHS as like a middle manager. Tried to be a middle manager, ended up being sucked back up to be a senior manager again. And then after a while was asked to go and run a GP practice. So in 2019, I ended up as the practice director of quite a large GP practice. And then 2020 arrived. I was asked to be a partner in the practice, which I decided I would. So I was a GP, a partner in a GP practice with 15 GPs, and the 2020 had arrived, and initially my programming kicked in because I'd been trained as a senior manager, director. I was, you know, what they call a gold commander. So when the 100-year pandemic arrives, I'd be one of the people in the bunker running the show, that sort of thing. So my programming kicked in. I was initially, you know, I got taken in by it initially, but about 3 or 4 weeks in, I realized, no, this isn't what they say it is. It was very clear to me that we're being lied to by national government, you know, all around the world. And what I was seeing on the front line when most of the world was locked down was not what they were telling us on the news.
No.
So I started speaking out in my practice. Initially got quite a bit of traction from other people who thought, yes, this isn't right. But then eventually I was asked to comply and be quiet. I then had to open a COVID vaccine centre against my wishes, and tried to keep changing things from the inside, um, against my personal wishes at the time. But I was asked to sort of stay and you know, be the guy on the inside who was trying to stop this, you know, runaway train. And I did that until October 21, when I could no longer, you know, my health deteriorated to the point where I thought, I've just got to save myself and get out. So I did. I walked away on a particular day. Sorry, excuse my dog who's trying to get in the room.
Or part of normal life.
Yeah, and oh, she managed to get in. So yeah, I walked away literally on a day, and with no employment, no income, and I've not worked since. I'm no longer registered as a pharmacist. I sort of gave that up a year and a half ago. Um, but in the interim, as soon as I walked away, I was asked to basically tell my story,
Mm.
and I was connected to sort of Stand in the Park group locally, and they said, come and do a talk in the local pub, you know, we'll keep it very quiet. And 200 people turned up. And
Just a
then
small gig then. Yeah.
small gig, and then somebody in the audience said, would you come and do another talk down the road? Yes, okay. 500 people came to that one, and the BBC were there, and it all started getting really serious, you know. And
Mm.
this was late 2021.
Yeah.
And I I'd been following the naturopath that you mentioned earlier on, and he, together with some colleagues, had formed what they call the Red Pill Revolution.
Mm.
I I I, I found a lot of support there. I found I was very aligned with what they were saying, and I agreed to become the red pill pharmacist. So for about 2 years, I was appearing in blogs on internet TV and things like that, being interviewed as the red pill pharmacist, sort of calling out the mainstream,
Yeah.
with the intention of alerting everybody to what was going on.
Hmm.
And for about 2 years, that felt important. I probably got something out of it in terms of, understanding and connection that I'd been missing.
Yeah.
But after about 2 years, I realized we're not making any progress here. So I stepped away from that at the beginning of 2024, essentially to put all my energies into building the alternative.
Yeah.
So I no longer feel there is value in shouting at the system itself or trying to alert people who can't see it. And I
Yeah.
think what we've got to do is build the alternative, and then people will eventually see how good it is and they will choose to come. So
Yes.
so that's
Yeah.
why I'm here, Maggie. That is, as you well know. So I've got a life's experience inside the mainstream system. I was very much a system guy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
understand how it works. I understand why people choose to work in that system, and also why people choose to give away their responsibility for their own health to that system.
Yeah.
Um, so I believe I know quite a bit about how to build the alternative, because
Yes.
the principles on which the alternative are based are almost the opposite of the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I'm completely open to that evolving. And so I think what I'm really looking forward to is working with you and anybody else who wants to come and join us to build what the community needs now and what it will
Yeah.
need tomorrow and what the children and our children's children will need. Um, and that's where my heart is. That's where my passion is now. So I look forward to doing that with you all.
Excellent. Yeah. And something you'd mentioned about bridging the gap at some point there, but I think you said to me before you see your role as being someone who bridges, and it's something you do very well.
Mm.
Um, to my perspective, you had to some extent go through what you had to go through in order to understand that system
Yeah,
as deeply as you could, so that you could then bridge the gap between what still works within that system and what doesn't need to be thrown out, and
yeah,
what we're moving towards, which I think is a more integrated and connected way of looking at health than the disjointed and not entirely effective way that
yeah,
health is being looked at the moment and has been for our lifetimes and beyond. Um,
absolutely. Because I mean, like many things that are organized top down, the words that are used and the sell that's given to the public where is not actually what's really going on. There are a lot of things that are inverted. So I think the very word healthcare, I think, has become tainted.
yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's almost like we need a new language really to talk
we
about
do,
health,
we do. I think because if we use words like that and try to reinvent what they are, we're going to struggle to convey what we're talking about.
because they're already loaded terms that people have a
Yeah,
concept of. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and we've talked recently about in exploring our creative ideas that we have. We've talked recently about what other words might be more suitable to describe how we now view health.
mhm,
And vitality is a word that's come up recently in recent conversations. Our picture of what health is now, it's a much broader view, and it contains all aspects of our being.
yeah,
To us as energetic beings,
yeah,
holistic and
absolutely.
esoteric view, as well as a physical. And I think our aim, both of us, have we both arrived through different journeys at the same feeling that health
Mm.
has to be much more integrated and a much bigger picture view than it has been until now. So
Yeah,
neither of us are sitting here saying that we have the complete answer to what that should look like, but we definitely are keen to be part of a conversation where that emerges through us and other people who want to have that conversation with us.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, thank you for your service and
yeah.
everything you've
Thank
had
you.
to go through in order to learn everything you now know.
Yeah, I look back on all that and I understand how essential it was that I took that role.
Yeah.
because it's made me who I am today. And I used to believe that a human being is just a bag of chemicals,
Yeah.
very much a material being, and that I didn't really the word consciousness I didn't use a lot, but
Have a concept for it, really.
I
Yeah.
had no concept of that. So literally, my thoughts were originate in my brain, and when I'm dead, I'm no longer here. I
And
know.
that's all separate from the body that you are and how that functions. And yeah,
So I no
not
longer
relevant.
no longer believe any of that. I mean, I understand we are a multidimensional being, and the where I'm currently at is that essentially we are an energy field,
Yeah.
and the material body is created by the energy field.
Mhm.
And I was aware of an energy field sort of before, but I used to think that was created by the material body.
Yes. And now
And
you're seeing it in reverse.
yeah,
Yeah.
seeing it in reverse, seeing the connectedness there.
Mhm.
I always in the NHS, I always tried to do preventative, medicine, healthcare.
Yeah.
So even though as a pharmacist and as a commissioner of hospitals, I strive for about 20 years to, turn the pyramid upside down, and
Yeah.
invest in the community in all of the things that we would see as the determinants of your health, or illness.
Mm.
And there's loads of evidence for doing that, but to do it in the system is almost impossible. You get attacked, you get stopped. You know,
And this happened to you when you started to achieve some
yeah,
success,
it,
isn't
it
it?
it just
Mm.
so many times.
Mm.
When you go up against the system and say, look, I'm going to prevent people getting ill, you get attacked by everybody, clinicians, managers, finance people, MPs. Like, well, so what you're saying, Graham, is the hospital is going to lose money and income,
Yeah.
and
If
no matter.
we make people better.
Yeah. And I'm saying, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And they're going, well, we don't want that because the hospital is very important. People need to rely on the hospital. And,
And for you, because your sense of purpose was about making people better. That's why
yeah,
you were in it.
yeah,
That must have been
exactly.
so very hard to square with who you really
It
are.
was. And
That's
the
probably
higher
why
up I
you're
went,
getting on well.
yeah. So I worked through local, regional, up to national roles. And the higher I got in the system, the less at home I felt,
Yeah.
because I just felt I was in a room with people who were, very important people, decision makers, but just didn't understand the basics of, human health
That's
and
what
well-being.
it is to be healthy. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
have no
And you were
interest
speaking a
in,
different language.
yeah. And you realize that, you're part of a system that doesn't want to be changed into something that's about health.
Yeah.
And so, and it's still the same. It's probably doubled down. I mean, 2020, 21 just confirmed all of my, um, uh, my understanding of the
Convictions.
system. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not going to change. It's never going to change. We have to build the alternative
Yeah.
system that makes the old one redundant.
Yes.
Is our
Yeah. Because
purpose.
it's a bit too entrenched now
Yeah.
in its ways of thinking and operating. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I find it poetic and beautiful that you didn't know about your early life origins and you didn't know about your lineage with your mum. And then
Mm.
you get to meet her and get to know her and realize that those truths that you're now coming into now that feel like a homecoming were always in your blood, you know? It's there in your family line.
Yeah.
To understand health from that bigger picture, holistic view and the esoteric perspective, that it was always in you. It's just that you didn't get to know it until later in life. And I just find it a very singular and fascinating story. And that you're arriving fully at all of that now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've just reached a certain milestone in my in age,
You don't
and
look, by the way.
I think and it's so I really see this as my almost like my second life now.
Yeah, yeah, the
What happens
second
from
part of
now
your
on.
purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you are, is it too soon to mention the project you're working on?
So I am connected to a project here in the UK which has the ambition to become exactly what we're talking about. The
Hmm.
the a significant part of the alternative system.
Yeah.
So I've been working with colleagues here in the UK on this for over a year now, and it's coming to a point of fruition, where it's actually
Mhm.
going to manifest in the real,
Yeah.
in on the ground as a building with clinicians working in it. So it's very exciting.
Good.
The ambition of it is way beyond anything that I could have comprehended. You know, we're talking about an international ambition over many, many years, you know,
It's
decades.
huge, isn't it, in scope?
It's
Absolutely
huge in
huge.
scope.
Yeah.
And the foundation of it, the genesis of it is here in the UK, and it's actually about 10 miles away from where I live, which is,
Yeah.
you know,
Uncanny.
it's one of those synergies, that one of those synchronicities that is just, you think, yeah,
Mind
okay.
blowing.
Hmm,
Yeah.
yeah. So
And there's a personal project you're working on, which you might not be ready to talk about yet, but you've nearly finished.
yeah, so
If
I
you're not
think,
ready to talk about it, don't.
well,
But
I will trail the fact that I will hopefully in 2020, oh no, I'll say definitely in 26 I will be publishing a book. So I've had two or three attempts to write a book before. Um, Never felt like completing it, like the time wasn't quite right, mainly because I have quite a dark story to tell, and I
yeah,
don't want to leave that with people. I want to talk about my journey and where it's leading to, and where other people can find hope.
yes,
Um,
yeah.
and I
Leave
think,
on a positive note. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And I think what we're talking about here, Maggie, and is, I think this will inform the sort of ending of the book. And there probably will be another book, but I think, I need to leave the end of this book, as you know, a sort of a jump off point to the future, but in a way that we can talk enough about it. We could say enough about it with certainty that it means something to people who are reading the book.
yeah, and it leaves things open and expansive, which is
Yeah,
definitely how you feel about the way forward.
definitely.
And it's more productive, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing all of that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
so and some of the people watching this might already know my story, but it was a slightly different version of getting to the same understanding that you've arrived at. Um, I where do I begin?
mm,
So I think I always knew that I had a vocation of some kind to help people, and that took different forms throughout childhood. I was raised Catholic, so at one point I wanted to be a missionary nun in Africa, and I was quite convinced at 7 that that's what I would be doing.
mhm,
But you move away from the religion of your upbringing quite early, and or certainly I did. I was about 12 when I found that the questions I had weren't really being answered by that religion in a way that was satisfying for me. And suppose I started then exploring other. I started looking into comparative religion. I knew that I was a woman of faith. I knew that I had a connection to the superior being that felt very active and alive in my heart, even though it didn't require me to go to a church to connect. I was prayerful and was a natural agony aunt for all my mates at school. So when I was 14, before I'd even encountered a boy, I think I'd paid really close attention to the kind of relationships that my older siblings were having because relationships were always a fascination for me. How human emotions worked and human psychology was just always observing and taking notes. So when my friends all started to date, they'd come to me and go, "Oh, what do you think this means? And what do you think that means?" And I was just naturally that person, kind of the mum of my friend group. Um, and then when I was 15, the school that I went to, which was a good school, thankfully, I was lucky to go to a good school in North London, started to introduce psychology as a GCSE. And I went to my dad, who was an insurance sales manager, trying to feed 7 children and clothe them and educate them, but had a real passion for the work of Carl Jung. And probably had he had his time again, he would
mhm,
have been a psychotherapist or psychoanalyst of some kind, because that was definitely where his heart lay. And I went to him and said, look, you understand all this stuff and you know that I want to help people. It looks as though I've got an option to take GCSE psychology. What do you reckon? And he said, well, I know you, and you're not you're not the best with numbers, and you're probably not the best when it comes to things like science. I mean, he even joked when we went to collect my GCSE results, and I saw that I'd got a B in maths and a B in dual science. He said, did they mix up your results with somebody else? Like, should we go back and check? Which sounds mean, but it was a joke. But yeah, I'm kind of known to be almost dyscalcular. Is it dyscalcular when you have almost like a a dyslexia with numbers. I'm not great with them. So he said, from his understanding, the traditional study, the mainstream study of psychology was very maths-based and statistics-based, and he
Mm.
said it will just completely suffocate the joy out of your vocation of wanting to help people. You'll be so bored. He said, do what you want to do, obviously, but my advice, knowing you, would be just to live your life and have life experience. Study what you're drawn to study in your way. And then when you're about 40 and you've got some life experience under your belt, set up a practice, practicing what you want to practice, doing it your way.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. And I really respected his opinion on these matters. So I didn't take psychology and I took the subjects that I happened to be quite good at, which were art, English, that, that history of art, Latin. For some reason, I decided to do that and didn't do so well at A level. Um, but yeah, he then passed away when I was 18. So just after I'd finished my exams and just after my 18th birthday, he had to go for heart surgery, which was supposed to be routine, but his heart disease was worse than was recognized at the time, and we lost him unfortunately in that surgery, and that was a huge shock to me. I actually went grey overnight with the loss and the shock of that at 18. Um, and I think at that point, I'd kind of been losing my way in terms of what my vocation was. I'd been thinking, oh, maybe I want to do something in the field of art. Maybe I want to go and study English as a degree and see if I become a teacher or something. I wasn't sure, but I'd kind of lost my way in terms of the vocation of helping people and how that could take shape. And losing him was such a shock to me that I found myself a year or so later in, what I would now consider a grief-related depression. I don't even know if that's a term, but to me, it seems logical if you love somebody dearly and you lose them, that you're going to slip into a slump of grief. And I was having a hard time. I was doing an art foundation course at the time because it seemed like a logical step towards maybe doing an art degree, seeing if I liked that. But I was so depressed that I actually missed my whole second term and almost got kicked off the course, but then made up for 2 terms worth of work in that last term and managed to get myself back in order. And a trigger warning here. I'm about to mention something that may trigger people, but I was having moments where I was contemplating not being here anymore.
Mm.
Nothing that I seriously wanted to follow through on, but I knew I wasn't doing well, and I thought I need to get some help. I'll go to my GP. My GP will know what to do.
Mm.
And went to my GP and spoke to her, and she was quite cold and harsh. Didn't have a good bedside manner, quite a cold person. And I told her what I was going through, and she sort of barked a couple of questions at me and said, "So what color does life look like to you?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know how to answer that. I don't know, blue." She said, "It's black, isn't it? It's like a dark tunnel, and all you can see is darkness." And I was like, kind of. I'm just letting you know
Mm.
that I'm pretty sad. I lost my dad. I'd like some support. I'd really love to be put on a waiting list, perhaps to talk to a psychotherapist if you've got one of those. Oh no, it's way too long. It'll be 6 months. So, in the meantime, here are two prescriptions for two different types of antidepressants, and I strongly suggest you start taking these. And I said, I really don't want to go down the chemical route because I don't think this is a chemical problem. Thank you, no. But she thrust them at me, and I walked out and tore them up and put them in the bin outside the clinic. And then shortly after that, met a wonderful woman in a clothes shop, and I just got chatting to her, and she said, "I bet you're a Gemini." And I said, "What?" She said, "Oh, I can tell. You're like equally analytical and emotional." And I was like, "Yeah, okay. How do you know that?" Um, and a few years before, my dad had crept out of a room in my house and approached me, I think on my 15th or 16th birthday, and pressed this little leather pouch into my hand and quietly said to me, it was quite eccentric, "Gemini, it's important," and then just scuttled away before anybody noticed. And I opened up this little pouch, and there was a little pendant of the Gemini twins in it that he'd given me as a gift. That was all. We didn't talk about it other than that, but I think he knew that I had an interest in the esoteric, and he was putting his thumb up and saying, "That's a good direction for you. But don't tell the others; they won't get it." Um, so I was already intrigued with that stuff. I think I was already in the habit of categorizing the people that I met based on their sun sign. I was like, oh, I was always curious to ask what sun sign somebody was, and then starting to notice certain what I like to call coding of energy in the way that that person would show up and the kind of themes that that person would attract in their life. And it helped me to understand them, to understand human nature, and to understand myself. I also inherited my dad's tarot cards when he passed away. I didn't even realize he had them, but nobody else wanted them, and I got 3 decks and started playing with tarot.
Mm.
Realized it was a wonderful tool as a young would have used it for self-reflection and self-analysis and to know thyself. And to develop that connection with your intuition and start to hear that inner voice and tune into it, which I think has got to be our greatest guide.
Mm.
Um, through life really to help us navigate. So yeah, speaking to this lady, she said, "Well, I run a spiritual and psychic development class, just around the corner from where I worked in the local Waitrose. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Hopefully I am. Um, and I started joining her class, and she taught me the basics of hands-on healing. I had my first experience of Reiki there. I curled up in a ball and cried my heart out quietly because I had this big release of grief because I was
Mm,
held and I felt loved and I felt safe. And suddenly, all the stuff I've been bottling up, trying to look after my mum, trying to take care of my little brother, neither of whom had asked for it, but I was doing the displacement stuff that you do when you're not ready to deal with your own grief. I felt safe enough to start to release all of that. And it just was such a revelation to me that I could feel held in that way and that it's possible just to put your hands on somebody and channel some energy and then give them the permission to offload some of that emotional baggage that otherwise, as you and I both now know, becomes physical illness over
yeah.
time if not dealt with and not processed properly. So yeah, I learned some basic techniques. I seemed to have an affinity for it. I was getting good results with other people. And the first time I received Reiki, specifically, the guy who gave me the Reiki didn't know that I was crying because I'd kept it quiet and we were in a dark room. And he said afterwards, "You've got a huge burden of grief that you're carrying because you're looking after other people." And he said, "And you also have a dairy intolerance that you need to look at because that's going to make you really unwell." And I was like, "Really?" So
Mm,
like, I would just eat cheese until it was coming out of my ears. I love the stuff. And I then did a sensitivity test shortly afterwards that confirmed the dairy intolerance. And yeah, I realized that I did have to start paying attention to my emotional health because I was running away from it and trying to put other people first. So a lot was learned then about how you do grief and what natural solutions are there to support you when you're going through emotional turmoil or crisis or emotional change. And yeah, I just started working with healing techniques with people outside of kind of the general secretarial PA kind of roles that I was doing, offering people healings, offering people readings, learning more about myself, helping other people to learn more about themselves. And then at 27 had a kind of an epiphany that I really needed to get back on track with really properly learning how to do healing, and that was my path. So I did. I learned Reiki and I took it to teacher level, started teaching in a couple of local shops. Um, Loved it. Loved watching it unfold in people's lives and see people have the same kind of revelations and support from it that I'd had. Um, and then at 36, lost my mum after a year and a half battle with cancer. And that was another, I saw my dad's death as a kind of an initiation onto my path to working out where I was meant to be going. And it's weird, it happens in 9-year cycles. In numerology, I'm a nine. So at nine, we had a major house move from Newmarket to London, which was hugely life-changing for me. At 18, I lost my dad. At 27, I had this big epiphany after being made redundant twice in one year about getting back onto the track of really learning healing and getting on with that as a life path. 36, I lost my mum. So every 9 years, it was something major that happened. It was like an initiation that pushed me further into my path. And it was very clear to me that I needed to dig deeper and do more than just Reiki. So I signed up to a 2-year intensive shamanic training course where I learned 5 shamanic healing techniques and then set up my business part-time 10 years ago.
mhm.
And that's now known as Divine Balance. But I found, that there's also running concurrently with that. And well, I'll just finish that line of travel. When I set up my business, I was 39 and I was sat there in this practice, beautiful practice in Salisbury, which was run by my friend who was a massage therapist, who was one of my guinea pigs when I was doing my case studies for the shamanic work. Loved the sound healing I did and said, "I want you to work with me so I can do people's bodies and then I can send them to you for like the emotional
Mm,
massage side of it." And I was there with the bookcase over here, which you guys can't see, but
quite,
I
yeah.
was putting all my dad's books in that bookcase, setting up a practice, and I heard his voice in my head reminding me of what he'd said to me when I was 15 and looking at my GCSE options and saying, "Set up a practice when you're 40, doing it your way." And I was 39, and it was like goosebumps and chills all
Yeah.
over. I didn't even deliberately follow your advice, but it's exactly how it's happened. So that was quite special. And then yeah, 2021, um, or in 2020 with the lockdowns, I lost that practice after 3 years of working very hard because it had to be shut down overnight. And then we just moved into this house. So my hubby, who's a builder, said, "Well, why don't we turn this front room, which we're not going to use for anything else, into your new practice? And then when lockdowns are lifted, people can come and see you here at home and you can save some money on travel and overheads." I was like, "Okay."
Mhm.
And then entered 2021 full of beans, very excited to get back on track. And then some childhood trauma surfaced, which completely knocked me off my socks. And I then discovered another healing method that I worked with to help me through the crisis, which is the Heoka trauma healing method, which you know about. And and yeah, that added another string to the bow, I guess. And I just love now working to help people to find solutions to dealing with their emotional pain and what you would call mental and emotional health, but without a chemical fix being necessary. You know, the old school ways that
Yeah,
our ancestors would have dealt with these matters. You know, if I try to explain it to somebody who's got no concept of the way that I work, I say, when you break your leg, you obviously have to go to a surgeon and have that fixed by a surgeon. When you break your heart and you go to mainstream medicine, they want to give you medication most of the time or talk about it endlessly, you know, and those solutions don't necessarily work for everybody. They certainly wouldn't have been right for me, but the old school energetic ways of working, the esoteric ways of working, the other ways that I work, are about looking at the root cause and going there and addressing it there energetically. It's a spiritual problem and it needs a spiritual solution, right? Um,
absolutely.
so yeah, and the other side of that journey was that I also had a physical health journey, which I won't go into too much, but loosely speaking, had autoimmune issues. That's how you would describe it since I was 18, 19. Funnily enough, after dad died, so no doubt related to the grief, but that wasn't picked up at the time. Had all sorts of gut dysbiosis issues, had all sorts of investigative stuff done through the mainstream, but no answers were given, no solutions were given. I was given a diagnosis of like IBS and stuff like that, but nothing to actually help me heal. So that started me on a journey of looking at natural health on the physical as well. And I realized that I had a heavy metal load from lots of dentistry work and having swallowed metal fillings, and went through a path of chelation of the mercury, and then realizing that there was also a candida picture there. And the gut dysbiosis was to do with bacterial overgrowth of an otherwise very helpful bacteria, but when it's overgrown, it's not helpful in the
Yeah,
same way. But that all of that was causing things like chronic fatigue and chronic pain, as well as the emotional stuff that I was still shedding and dealing with, and carrying. So, you know, I now at this stage in my life realize that my picture of health was all of those things, and all of those aspects needed to be addressed concurrently.
yeah,
And that every time I went to the mainstream for help, I was getting a small part of the picture, but not the whole picture. And some of it was helpful. And there's no part of me that wants to bash mainstream medicine because I saw miracles with my mum when she was going through her cancer treatment. Some of the treatment she had definitely didn't work and made her worse. Some of it kept her going and
yeah,
allowed her to achieve some of her ambitions of spending longer here and more time with her kids. And yeah, I saw beautiful souls working in that
yeah,
system who had absolutely beautiful hearts and were in it for the right reasons, were doing wonderful things. I also worked for 6 years in a vet hospital and again saw things that perhaps weren't working, but also saw wonderful, beautiful, heart-centered people working very hard to help animals live and live better. So I'm not here to bash anything or anybody, but I do acknowledge that my journey towards finding the answers I needed was much broader than was available through mainstream channels.
yeah,
And as a result, I really want to be part of the conversation around how we marry together everything that works, you know? The ancient stuff that still works, the modern stuff that works, stuff that perhaps haven't even talked about yet.
yeah,
Um, but you know, there's a conversation to have, and again, that's why I want to be here talking about this, because I think it's going to be lots of voices that come together and find the right way forward.
yeah. Well, it's a beautiful journey, isn't it? I mean, when you look back on it, but I think what we both share is the desire to address root causes, and I think
Yeah,
you know, and I say that now in a much broader context than I used even 5 years ago. You know, as a pharmacist, in the NHS, I
yeah,
was
the route's a different route now.
yeah, exactly. It goes much deeper, and it's into our soul and the energetic body, and it's intergenerational even, and we
Absolutely, yeah,
and that's not something I had any concept of, until very recently. But I've, like I didn't talk about my own health issues, but I've had a journey of, my own sort of mental and physical health issues, which have informed, my abilities and my views now, and I think
I
that
understand
that's
them.
what's
Yeah.
common, isn't it, between it? And I do believe the best healers, you know, and I think that that's what's common, isn't it, between it? And I think that that's what's common, isn't it, between it? And I think that that's what's common, isn't it, between it? And I think that that's what's common, isn't it, between it? And I do believe the best healers, have to have healed themselves first, or because if you
Yeah,
don't,
it's not just an intellectual understanding of you have to have an embodied
yeah,
experience, I think, to
yeah,
really help others. Yeah.
I think so. And the yourself and lots of lovely healers who've come to my aid over the last 4 or 5 years all share that, that they've had their own journey
And battles.
and
Yeah,
yeah, and battles, and they've, but they want to stay in the game and to help others, which is just such a wonderful thing, isn't it?
it is. It is. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think there's a huge amount left to say now that we've introduced ourselves and our ideas. I mean, Graham and I have talked about perhaps doing a regular chat like this and inviting members of the little community that we're still part of to come and join because everybody's got a beautiful perspective to offer and their own stories that are similar to the ones that we've told. Um, but also in that project we were working on together last year, developed a list of people that we'd love to approach externally, in the field of health or talking about health in some way, whether that be holistic or physical or both. So there's scope for us to be doing maybe interviews and sharing those.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, we want to invite anybody who's listening to this and feels inspired and wants to connect with us and be part of that conversation to do so. And there'll be details in the description box if you want to reach out to us,
Hmm.
find out more about our little community and the calls and support things that we do and offer. Um, yeah, and other than that, I am at the moment writing courses to teach people the way that I work, and that will be written alongside a book telling the story of my journey, which I've just given in a nutshell here. So hoping to release those next year. Lots to do. Um,
Yeah.
and I may be involved, hopefully, in some way in the other project that Graham's mentioned as well. So maybe we'll be able to talk more about that in time. But
Yeah.
certainly would love to have anyone involved in this conversation who would like to be, as long as everyone keeps an open mind and is respectful and that we're focused on solutions in the future rather than bashing
Yeah.
anything or anyone, because that doesn't seem to be the way forward. I think we're both in agreement with that
Yeah.
and have been
And,
for a while.
and it does feel like 2026 is going to be a significant year of acceleration, doesn't it?
It
And
does.
and bringing things into, into the into the material, the 3D, if you like, and actually having a physical presence that's only been a sort of online presence up to now, really.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And it being, and I mentioned this in my last video if anyone watched it, but it being a 1 year numerologically and the year of the horse, which is speed and momentum and travel and power and forward movement. A 1 year is also the beginning of a new cycle, and it feels like a really good time to be starting this kind of a conversation and letting it gather steam organically and see where it goes, see where it takes us. But we're both excited, and
Very much so, yeah.
yeah, we hope that comes across and look forward to speaking with you all more
Yeah.
in time and each other.
Yeah. So see you very soon.
Yeah, all right. Take care, everybody. Lots of love.
Bye.